We've all probably had somebody in our lives that we have to suck up to for some reason or another. They're in a position of power over us. They have something that we want, or they are the only person who can give us something we want. So that's human. Imagine though that other person is the weakest, most pathetic loser you've ever met in your life, and he does not have power over you. In fact, he's made it clear that he's hell bent on your destruction. I've talked very often over the years about Donald Trump's mental state, his developed psychological background, how he got the way he is. But I think a few years ago, we needed to start changing our focus to figuring out what's wrong with people who support him, but also what is wrong with people who don't fight against him or stand up to him. I have lost all patience with those who actually have the power and are in the position to say something to his face that will undo him. And I promise you, it would not take much, especially when there's nothing left to lose, especially when there are so many other people on the front lines who don't have the power and the position, who don't have the protection, and keep standing up to him anyway. So it might sound like I'm talking about one specific person, but I'm not. There are a lot of people right now who could get in Donald Trump's face, tell him what they think of him, tell the world what they should think of him, and reveal who he really is to those people who are still too deluded not to see it. And yet, they continue not to do it. And I'd like to know why. Let's dive in. Hello, everybody. Welcome to today's episode of Marriage Jumps Nerd Avengers. It is wonderful to be with you and with me, Adam Parkhamenko, former DNC National Field Director and Substack writer at thealtmedia.com. Adam, it's very good to see you. Thank you for being here. And you're muted.
No, I'm not. Happy belated birthday.
Oh, thank you very much. Very kind of you. I owe you a text now that you're saying that out loud.
No, you're good. I just want to make sure you had a great birthday.
I did have a great birthday. Thank you for that. It was really fun. And now it's over. And now I have to start paying attention to the world again. Had a brief respite, but I was a little bit alluding to the new Prime Minister of Canada. But again, I think he's just one of many who fall into that category. But I think today we saw just a pretty egregious example of what I was talking about. Donald and Carney met to discuss tariffs. Again, the tariffs that Donald started, the trade war, the unprovoked unilateral trade war Donald started, the tensions between the two countries that are entirely of Donald's making, and then they held a press briefing afterwards. Donald, of course, made it completely about himself. So let's take a look at this clip.
Thank you very much, everybody. It's a great honor to have Prime Minister Mark Carney with us. As you know, just a few days ago, he won a very big election in Canada. And I think I was probably the greatest thing that happened to him, but I can't take vote credit. His party was losing by a lot. And he ended up winning, so I really want to congratulate him. It was probably one of the greatest comebacks in the history of politics, maybe even greater than mine.
Oh, for God's sakes. All right. So nauseating. And I mean, what Donald doesn't seem to understand is that Carney won because everybody in Canada hates Donald so much. So yeah, I mean, I guess you could credit Donald with that, but still. I want to play one more clip before we dive into this. Donald is, he's a deeply offensive person. And he basically claimed that when it comes to trade, Canada needs the United States, but the United States does not need Canada. So I want to play this clip and watch. Let's focus on Carney's expression.
Prime Minister Carney talked about the American betrayal. How do you react if Canada decided not to shop in the American store as much as before and decided to partner with other countries?
Well, we don't do much business with Canada from our standpoint. They do a lot of business with us. We're at like 4%. And usually those things don't last very long. We have great things, great product, the kind of product we sell, nobody else can sell, including military. Look, we make the best military equipment in the world, and Canada buys our military equipment, which we appreciate, but we make the best military equipment in the world by far. The missiles, the submarines, everything we have is really top notch.
Yeah. But we make it with stuff we buy from Canada, like steel and aluminum and whatever. So Carney did make himself clear. So I want to play this clip, but what I'm more concerned about is what other things that Carney had to say. Here he is talking about Canada's not being for sale.
As you know from real estate, there are some places that are never for sale.
That's true.
We're sitting in one right now, Buckingham Palace, visited as well.
That's true.
And having met with the owners of Canada over the course of the campaign last several months, it's not for sale, won't be for sale ever. But the opportunity is in the partnership and what we can build together.
Ouch. First of all, the White House is not just for sale. It has been sold. So let's be clear there. And the way that Carney chose to accommodate Donald and back off from his very clear and emphatic campaign rhetoric kind of made me sick, Adam.
Yeah, I mean, I watched this and there were some moments where I think that you almost have to speak Canadian because you're like, yeah, he seemed polite, but he was basically telling Trump to go fuck himself. And it was hard to not look past the Home Depot decor in the background. But I do think it's refreshing to see somebody who can sit there and, make the correct faces and also clarify certain things. And watching Donald Trump, I mean, I'm curious your take on this, but it almost seemed as if Trump was taken back. I mean, he was coming across very like beta, almost like a cuck, as MAGA would describe, where he's like, maybe, this was even more of a, better win than mine. So I do think that despite, the lies that Donald Trump was throwing out there and the faces that the new PM made to clarify those, it was pretty clear that not only is Canada not having any of this, but the more that we have leaders like we do in Canada right now, they're going to reject that and they're going to become a bigger power together.
Yeah, I'm actually, I experienced it differently. I think that, yes, Carney did score some points for sure. And as for Donald's rhetoric, yes, he did seem a little bit put off his guard. But that is, he's always using his own experience as having the biggest comebacks as the frame of reference. So I don't know if that had as much meaning. But what worried me, or what worries me in general, I guess, is that it's not that Carney was backing down from his position, but, and it's not Carney's job necessarily, but somebody's got to be much more blunt. Like, Donald is not going to get the subtlety here. And if Carney spoke to Donald the way he spoke to the Canadian people during the election, I think the Donald's reaction to this would have been much worse, which, quite frankly, at this point is what we need. And I don't know, like, is Donald going to make things worse for Canada than he already has? Maybe, maybe. I just kind of feel like we're at this very serious crossroads. We're running out of time.
Hmm.
And I want somebody to push to force the point, and maybe Carney's not the person to do it. And maybe I'm completely mistaken. Maybe he had his plan and he went through with it. I'd be curious to know what Canadians thought of it, actually. So maybe I'm being too hard on Carney, and he actually was effective.
Well, Sam Youngman and I were talking about this probably, I don't know, 2 or 3 hours ago, because Sam had kind of posted something on Blue Sky that was sort of, it drew some responses that I think were from Canadians, because I think it kind of came across as, a little like lukewarm. And I think some others didn't necessarily see that. So maybe given the fact that like this election just took place, and given how much Donald did come up in the campaign, maybe this was sort of the best that he could do to sort of, navigate this first meeting, given how, things did change in Canada, and this campaign was won, and this campaign was very much about Donald Trump.
Yeah. Well, we'll see if Carney builds on it. We'll see what comes from this meeting. I don't know if we really have any specifics about what was discussed, but
But for this topic, are you planning on discussing Maine today? Because I looked at sort of some of the topics, but it reminded me of the governor of Maine, right? Who basically stood up in the Oval Office. And
I believe we are. Let me get it.
Okay.
Let me double check, because I was.
I don't want to get out in front of it, but
yeah. I mean, we either are, or it's either happening during the live, because I was looking at two different things at the same time and having a difficult time.
I think we've learned this week, and we could talk about it more later when others are on. But like, I think we've learned this week, when someone stands up to him and says they're going to do something, right? Everyone takes this and runs with it, and they're like, "Oh my gosh, look at this incredible moment! This governor is awesome." And then when it happens and she wins and she follows through with her words, we don't hear anything about it from anybody.
Yeah, actually, if you could talk a little bit, because are not going to be discussing that today. We're going to be discussing it later. So if you can talk about the governor of Maine and what she's done and what she's accomplished by not backing down and not being subtle.
Yeah, I mean, so the governor of Maine was, was there in the Oval Office, and basically, Donald Trump once again tried to humiliate somebody, and she stood her ground, and she made very clear, "I'll see you in court." And he just sort of like, laughed this whole thing off. There's a quote here from the Portland Press. "I stood in the White House when confronted by the President of the United States. I told him I'd see him in court," Mills said, according to the Portland Press Herald. "We did see him in court, and we won." And this was about Title IX violations without the proper procedure. But long story short, what we're seeing is that Democrats that do stand up and do punch back and fight this sort of schoolyard bully on day one succeed. And I think that this is a perfect example of in the future where this might be a new relationship between the Canadian PM and Donald Trump. But when we have a big win like this and we have stories like this, I think people are going to push back. I think this first meeting was a first meeting, and the guy probably did the best that he could to sort of navigate these two things. But what we need to see from Democrats in the House and the Senate, and more governors, I'm not sure which primary Gavin Newsom thinks he's planning on running in.
Wow.
Is to be more like Governor Mills of Maine.
Yeah, I agree with that. Governor Mills of Maine, Governor Pritzker of Illinois, et cetera, don't be like Gavin Newsom. Maybe he's going for the Kimberly Guilfoyle vote. I don't know.
Yeah, I think it was what Noem was the one that said maybe he's trying to win her back, right?
Well, she's in Greece, last I heard. So maybe. Yeah, they could live there together. That would be awesome. Okay, so it will not surprise you to know that once again, Pete Hegseth has made a total fool out of himself and just revealed, not revealed because we already knew this, but just demonstrating once again how incompetent and unknowledgeable he is and unfit for his very serious position. He pulled funding from Ukraine without approval from the White House, which is really astonishing. Like these people do not understand the chain of command, or they don't understand anything about not only how the government works, but what their jobs actually are. Reuters reports that within days of a January 30th meeting with Donald, Hegseth paused 11 planes carrying artillery shells and other weaponry that were bound for Poland. A potential pause in aid to Ukraine was discussed during the meeting, but Donald never signed off on it, never made it formal. So the order from Hegseth's office to stop the flights blindsided Donald and the White House, top security officials, officials in Ukraine and Poland. Then this was back when Mike Waltz was still national security advisor. He was forced out because of the signal controversy that was as much Hegseth's fault, actually. Waltz intervened to reverse the decision, and the flights were back in the air a week later. But, when you're in the middle of a war, a week is a long time to be without equipment you were anticipating. And this report comes hours after even more revelations on Monday that Hegseth's use of the Signal chat app is more extensive than previously known. And I mean, Adam, I don't know. I don't see this issue covered in the context of national security. It's like, oh, Hegseth's incompetent and he shouldn't be in the job, and isn't this outrageous, and they're breaking all these laws, and they don't even understand what the procedure is. But the truth of the matter is everything these people do, and it isn't just Hegseth, it's Tulsi Gabbard, it's it was Mike Waltz, etc., is weakening our national security. Not just in terms of their inability to follow protocol, but because that leads to our allies no longer feeling they can trust us, and then potentially not being willing to share their intelligence information with us.
Yeah, I mean, it's sort of like an interesting catch-22 when you think about it, because when you put someone like Tulsi Gabbard in the position that she's in, that is already going to stop a certain number of intelligence being shared with us just off the bat before we even hear, stories like and see the photos of Signal with the Israeli vendor overlay on top of it, and so forth. But what's sort of interesting too is with all of this coming out, while many of our allies are not going to be sharing the intelligence that they should be sharing, they're going to be getting a number of intelligence from us just simply by monitoring all of the different apps in ways that our folks are communicating. So the sharing technically will continue with these other countries. When you see hacking attempts and so forth, a lot of these, if you have two-factor on your phones and email and so forth, that's going to prevent the basic attacks. But a state-sponsored attack is a very different thing. And when you have a state-sponsored group in government that is going in to monitor Signal chats and other things like that, when this happened the first time, and we had somebody that was in Russia doing this in this administration, we already knew that the Russians knew exactly what was going on. I think the good news, and Alexander Vindman and others have said this, is that a number of these, and this started when we held back a number of the things that were supposed to go the first time, which then got reversed, within probably 72 hours or a number of days to Ukraine, is that any of this stuff that they pull back or hold from Ukraine may have like short-term ramifications, but really you wouldn't see any effect for at least 6 months, because Russia is just not in a position to take advantage and move when something like this happens. So why this administration continues to support Putin and Russia in this war, I have no idea. The fact that Donald Trump has continued to admit that he was, wrong, and just sort of saying things on the campaign trail in regards to ending this war right away. But Ukraine is a very different place than it was years ago. And Putin has a very sort of Cold War mindset. So he views the Ukrainian military as people in uniform only, as opposed to the 40 million Ukrainians throughout the country many of them have who are not in the military have already put down, their instruments if they're musicians and their painting supplies if they're artists to go out there and fight and give their lives, because 40 million people do not want to live under Putin.
Right.
And I think that is one of the big problems he has, because Putin said that he could take Kyiv in 11 minutes. And here we are years later, and he still hasn't made a dent in the capital.
Yeah. Joining us now, Waj Ali, editor of The Left Hook on Substack, co-host of Democracy-ish on Mary Trump Media, and co-host of the podcast America Unhinged. Hey, Waj.
Hey, how's everyone doing?
Awesome.
As well as one can during the fall of democracy. Yes.
Well, it's alarming, but we muddle through.
At least we have our cats.
Just make sure you have your cat in there. Make it
That's
some
right.
noise for the end.
That's right. Exactly.
Watch the subscribers just like quadruple.
Right? You guys
Adam
heard the
just spent
cat
5
meowing.
minutes
Come on,
breaking
let's
things
go.
down with intelligently. You might get 200 subscribers, but a cat shows up, we're gonna just crush.
It's all
It should
about the
be.
cats, honestly. And
By the way,
dog.
Mary, maybe for like your live where we're not on, I don't know if you saw, but they brought together the biggest dog and the smallest dog for a
Yes, I
play
heard
date.
about that.
Yeah, it's a good one.
I think that would be something we would be interested in. So Waj, we were just discussing, although I'm sure the people watch it would be more than happy for us to continue talking about animals. There are days in which I would be more than happy
Penguins
to do
might
that
come
too.
up.
Penguins might, turtles, absolutely. So what we're talking about, the fact that without authorization, Secretary of Defense Pete Hegseth just canceled funding for Ukraine.
Yep.
And then that the order was eventually reversed, but it was an entire week during which Ukraine didn't, or Poland, because the stuff was going to go to Poland. And that's a long time when not only you're at war, but you're under siege by the country that illegally invaded you. And especially given all the uncertainty created by the Trump regime in Ukraine because of Donald's obedience and loyalty to Putin. But just sort of the way in which this issue seems, generally speaking, not to be discussed in terms of, Hegseth's incompetence, or the fact that people like Tulsi Gabbard are part of our national security apparatus, that I just don't hear enough people discussing it in the context of our national security and how debilitating it is potentially.
I know. I think I'm so glad that you all are focusing on this, because two things. Number one, there is a trilogy to Signalgate, right? In 100 days, we have a full-fledged trilogy. Act 1, Act 2, and Act 3. Maybe it's like the prequel. We're going to have like 9 of them before it's all said and done for the Sith Lords.
And a red lightsaber appearance.
Yeah, red lightsaber.
Yes.
Like, talk about not even understanding your pop culture. And even on May the 4th, folks who don't know, May the 4th is, International Celebrate Star Wars Day. Donald Trump and the White House promote this image of Donald Trump with muscles in front of bald eagles with a red lightsaber. And then, you could just take that moment to say, May the 4th be with you. And then that's it. A nice way to win over American publics, but it's Donald. So then he goes, even to the radical leftists and the murderers and the rapists and this and that, right? And you sit there and you laugh about it, but I don't think you should, because you're seeing the mindset of an authoritarian regime that unintentionally, perhaps subconsciously, portrays himself as this evil Sith Lord authoritarian who looks at anyone who's against him as the enemy, right? And which is literally the plot of Star Wars, and is willing to use authoritarian violence to crush. And a day after that, he says, we're going to reopen Alcatraz for all the who? Us, me, Adam, Mary. Because, folks, it isn't just the immigrants. It's anyone who's against him, right? And meanwhile, you see the most incompetent, vindictive individuals in positions of leadership, people like Kash Patel and Pete Hegseth, who have openly said before they were appointed that they will use their positions to go after the enemies. Who are the enemies? Mary, me, Adam, the press, judges, right? People of color, brown people, LGBTQ. And the Supreme Court says, yes, transgender soldiers, you're risking your lives, even though me and Adam and Mary aren't. But Donald Trump hates you, so you know what? He gets to kick you out of the military. And meanwhile, the Secretary of Defense, who has vowed to purge America of DEI, transgender soldiers, right? That's happening today. Well, it happened in the first thing, but now the Supreme Court, of course, rubber stamped it. Purging the military of mentions of Enola Gay and Navajo code talkers and Jackie Robinson. This man has again and again and again compromised national security by using an unsecured app that the Pentagon itself warned the Trump administration about. Not once, not twice, 3 times. And Mike Waltz, who has been reassigned to the ambassador of the UN, well, let's see if he gets the confirmation, violin for Elise Stefanik. She's like, that was my job. Why? Mike Waltz, folks, last week when we did you saw the verbal fellatio tour at the cabinet where Donald fell asleep.
Thank you for putting it in such terms. I appreciate that.
It was just verbal fellatio. Like, can you give verbal
Thank you for saying it again.
Better than the other one. And Mike Waltz, folks, they had a picture of him using Signal, like literally at that, like after all this. And then the Wall Street Journal yesterday came out with another article about Pete Hegseth using this unsecure app. So, we sit there and we laugh about it, but we shouldn't, because the framing of it is correct. This is compromising our national security, compromising our military intelligence, compromising our armed forces. And what else do you expect, Mary, when you have a thoroughly unqualified Fox host whose own mother called him a predator, who wrote a book called American Crusade, who has allegations of alcoholic impropriety, financial impropriety, who's way in over his head, and they still have affirmative action for the world's most mediocre men, and literally they are compromising our troops, compromising our military, compromising our national security. The guy tried to get a dirty line to have Signal connected to his computer, right? And so you sit there and say, this is how self-destructive white supremacy is because we're aligning ourselves with Putin and Orban, betraying our allies. Ukraine literally is fighting for its own freedom and self-determination because they were invaded by Russia.
And ours, by the way.
We abandoned our European allies. We abandoned Ukraine. We abandoned Canada. We abandoned Mexico to cozy up to Netanyahu, Orban, Putin, the world's worst, and all for this romantic pipe dream of making America great again and going back to the 1930s when the white man was at top. At what cost? At what cost? Sorry for my rant.
No, well, at the cost of everything that this country is allegedly supposed to aspire to, basically. I don't know if you guys know this, but the Democrats have been waging a war on Christmas for decades now. Decades. And it's actually starting to have an impact because now Donald took over. His disastrous tariff policies are becoming clear, like the impact of them are becoming clearer. So we're finding out that ships are arriving in U.S. ports this week that are the first to carry Chinese goods hit with the 145% tariffs, which for those of you who maybe don't understand, that's an insane number, no matter what you're talking about. So the result is half-empty containers, a more than 50% drop in Chinese imports at the port of Los Angeles. Ryan Peterson, who's CEO of Flexport, told CNN, quote, a 60% decline in containers means 60% less stuff arriving. It's only a matter of time before they sell through existing inventory, and then you'll see shortages, and that's when you see price hikes. So, unquote. Port officials report 20% of May sailings have already been canceled. With 13 June sailings scrapped, importers are paying 2.5 times more than they did just last month. Retailers are stockpiling goods in China in order to avoid the tariffs. And logistics experts have warned that if the current trends continue, U.S. consumers could face a 60% drop in incoming products, causing widespread shortages and steep price hikes by summer. But Adam, guess what that's also going to mean? It means that either, and this is why Donald is trying to soften the ground here, which is something he's quite good at, actually. He's starting to tell his people, hey, you're spoiled brats. They don't need $30. They only need 2 or 3, like 2 or 3. Anyway, he's making it clear to his base that they better be prepared because there's not going to be either there's not going to be anything to buy, or goods are going to be so expensive that you're going to have to settle on getting 1/10 of what you would plan to buy in the first place. So, Adam, I think the war on Christmas is going very, very well, but it's the Republicans that are waging it.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I guess whoever would have thought that we were going to see the price of dolls would skyrocket to be above the price of Melania. But here we are.
Are they that much? Wow. Okay, that's something.
They were pretty cheap to begin with. But the price is going up. And I think, look, we've all seen the memes, but the fact that like we're sitting here and we've got a president who's saying a recession is okay, and MAGA's like, okay, good, recessions are okay. And that he is still like as delusional as we all thought, but like maybe more than ever to come out and say like, oh, the good parts of the economy are Trump and the bad parts are Joe Biden. And like the press just accepts that as an answer is insane. But as both of you have mentioned, and as Danielle has mentioned, I think that a number of people are going to have to feel pain that didn't think they were going to have to feel pain before anyone ever starts to wake up. And some of them won't. But we are getting to a point where, people are going to have trouble paying their bills and putting food on the table. They're not going to be able to invite their next door neighbors over for a meal. And one of the things that we all care about deeply and talk a lot about is the dignity of work and what you leave behind and what you're able to do for your family. And that is all in jeopardy right now because of Donald Trump.
Yeah, and it's entirely down to him. Don't let anybody tell you otherwise. Just for context, I think something like 80% of children's toys for Christmas, Christmas presents come from China. So while there's that, and the other thing that I wanted to follow up on something that Adam pointed to, which I think is incredibly important for those of us who need to understand what's going on. There are many people who support Donald who will accept willingly poverty, not getting their Social Security checks, not being able to have Christmas, not being able to eat food, because he's telling them that if they want to make America great again, those are the sacrifices they need to make for him. And
going to jail and lose, prior to a pardon, and losing everything with people like, Rudy Giuliani and others.
Right. And they will feel good about that. And I do think it's so important that we understand the psychology instead of looking at looking at all of this through our prism, because that just leads to confusion and complete paralysis.
I think I've been saying this. Well, I said it officially on air on Chris Hayes' show on MSNBC around 2017, 2018 during Donald's first administration, that because Chris was like, surely when they feel pain, they'll come around. And I said, no, you don't understand. It's a cult. We've lost, and I've said this on your show many times, we have lost, and I hope I'm wrong about this, for my lifetime at least, about 25 to 30% of Americans. And if you look at it historically, 25 to 30% of any country has usually gone along with like the worst ideas. Yeah. And I believe, and the analogy I'll give is which is one that is shared by Jonathan Metzl, who wrote this really good book, which is a precursor to what we're witnessing right, Dying of Whiteness, is he went in the South in particular and interviewed a lot of these Tea Party folks and Republicans. And they literally, folks, would rather die than get on Obamacare. Mm-hmm. And they did. Yep. They literally died. So you're going to see people dying for white supremacy, dying for the feeling of being great, dying due to right-wing misinformation, dying to own the libs, right? It has always been a self-destructive cult. And as far as MAGA is concerned, as far as the leadership is concerned, Donald Trump, they're all oligarchs, they're all rich, they're all billionaires. So it's toys for me, none for thee. Mini Mercedes for Baron, none for thee, right? Civility for me, cruelty for thee. Money for Bitcoin for me, recession for thee. And Elon Musk actually, unlike Donald, mentioned this, if you remember, before the election. He kind of let the cat out of the bag. He goes, well, it's going to be a little bit tough, it's going to be a little bit, we're going to have some sacrifices, but then eventually get better. And Donald was like, vote for me. And
that was a great South African accent.
It was really good. Something. It was Donald. It was Dr. Evil or something. I don't know what his accent is.
It worked.
It worked. You just think of a bumbling moron. And Donald said, vote for me immediately. Price of X will go down. War in Ukraine will end. And now he's openly, not just his base, Mary, he's telling everyone's, apparently, hey, It's going to be tough, but it's worth it. So they're openly saying austerity is good. Austerity now, right? And meanwhile, as Adam said, the reality, folks, is we've already lost at least 250,000 jobs. People don't have healthcare. People aren't going to spend money. Those containers that you showed coming to the docks, the one they showed last week in Seattle was empty. So 2 weeks ago, on an off-record meeting between the CEOs of Target, Walmart, and Trump, they warned Donald that by the summer, there's going to be empty shelves, folks, right? Yep. And as Adam then said, well, people still need these goods. So what are people going to do? They're going to raise the prices, right? So you can't afford eggs. You can't afford gas. You've lost your job. You don't have healthcare. Oh, and guess what? The prices of everything has increased, the stuff that you need. And oh, by the way, because we're still alienating our allies, that meeting with Canada today didn't go that well. There's going to be the threat of a global recession because this dumbass Donald hasn't backed down on a stupid trade war. So we're going to be in a world of pain. I do think that world of pain is going to wake up a lot of folks who were in the middle, a lot of folks who didn't vote, a lot of folks who said, I don't care about Democrats or Republicans, I want to change. So you're going to get that shift. You're already seeing it, folks, in 3 months. He's underwater on everything. He's underwater double digits on the recession, on economy, on inflation. But I think it's very important, Mary, you're right, to understand why 30% of Americans will ride with this guy. It is a murder-suicide pact. It is a death cult. They will kill themselves. If you're given a choice between sharing a room with me, you, and Adam, or burning down the house, they have chosen to burn down the village.
That's right. That's right.
And what they will go out and buy is ammunition before anything else that they need.
This is true. I mean, all we need to do is look at some people who own hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of guns and think, wow, what they could have done with that money. Like, that's college tuition. That's it's crazy. And I think, the point of this isn't to try to figure out what to do. Like, how do we reach them? The point is to say we cannot. So let's not waste our time. Let's move on from them. Because there's no point. Let's work on the people who are more, the people who don't vote, as you said, Waj, and the people who just wanted change for the sake of change.
And Mary, just one point on that. I mean, a lot of the folks that we're talking about that you're mentioning specifically, there's a bigger issue here, right, within the Democratic Party, because they're not saying, okay, I'm going to go become a Democrat. And you can look at the registration numbers in these different states. In Florida, if you look at where they're moving, they're becoming independents. And so, in the next 2 to 3 years, you might see in a state like Florida, very likely that Democrats are actually a third party. You're going to have Republicans, independents as the top two registrants.
That's fascinating. Yeah. So Democrats. Prepare.
I mean, not surprising, I suppose, in a state like Florida, but you are starting to see a drop and a switch where folks, Republicans continue to go up and Democrats are becoming independents.
Adam and I talked about this, Mary, because, if Democrats, people assume, it's a good point that, oh, this means people will just vote Democrat. They won't. They'll sit out. And if Democrats aren't messaging and channeling this rage and this anger and giving the Americans a clear story, you need a villain and a good guy, right? You need the conflict and you need a resolution. So, which is why I think, the moderates who are as useless as a third belly button, no disrespect to second or third belly buttons, like Alyssa Slotkins, but like, how they says, we got to do the war on woke and weak. Like, what? Why is Bernie Sanders and AOC talking about the oligarchy? Meanwhile, AOC and Bernie and others, Jasmine Crockett's, Van Hollen, who are taking up the fight, punching the bully in the mouth and saying, hey, look at the 1%, the elite, the rich. They're taking your money. You're seeing that resonate with a whole bunch of folks that Adam's talking about who have no fidelity to either party, but like, oh, you're taking on this rich robber baron who's taking my money. Oh, they are taking my money. Oh, look, Elon Musk gets a lot of money and I can't buy eggs. Elon Musk is friends with Donald Trump. All these mother effers are rich. You see those people galvanizing. The base.
And interestingly, I don't know if I could have predicted this actually, but the immigration debacle, the horrific ways in which the Trump regime is handling immigrants and the issue of immigration, which is to say illegally detaining and disappearing them to gulags in foreign countries, is also resonating with people. And I think with many of them, not because maybe they don't really care so much about what's happening to the immigrants, which is unfortunate. Well, I'll say what I really feel. It's despicable that they don't, but they understand the dangers of eroding the right to due process. Which again, something I had anticipated. And the Trump regime is ratcheting things up again. They're launching a program offering $1,000 to undocumented migrants if they agree to self-deport, calling it a cost-saving alternative to formal removal. This offer applies to single adults in detention centers and is framed by officials as a voluntary departure, although advocates warn that it preys on desperate people who lack legal support. Advocates also note that while the Trump regime claims this is less expensive than detention and deportation flights, the program risks coercing people to forfeit asylum claims under financial distress. And and I think, Adam, like, we're all going to be, or a lot of people are going to be in many awful situations in which they're going to have to choose between things that they shouldn't have to choose between. So as prices go up, do I feed my kids or do I heat the house in winter? In terms of this issue, do you self-deport? Or do you stay and fight, or do you self-deport so you can put food on the table for your kids?
Yeah, I
Right?
mean, two things right here. I think that one, things are so dire. It's almost the reverse of what we've seen for years, which is the great thing about America is you've got a lot of people here that are working their asses off and they're
Yep.
sending money back home to take care of their family. Now
right.
you might wind up in a situation where a dad takes that $1,000 to give that money to his family and leaves the country. And things are so dire and they need $1,000 because of Donald Trump. So there's that issue. But the other one is, I think this kind of comes back to the importance of, for everyone watching, attorneys, and whether you know friends who are attorneys or folks that are stepping up. There's been so many videos that have popped up online in the last week or two, including a few in the last 48 hours, where there was a great one I saw yesterday. An attorney rolls up and is like, "This is ICE. Let me get out of the car." For those that are not familiar with ICE, HSI, Homeland Security Investigations, it's sort of one of the kind of like youngest and newer I'd say agents that are out there in terms of after DHS was formed and stuff, right? These are not Secret Service, FBI, and so forth. And there's relatively few of them in certain areas. And so when they show up somewhere, it's not like if there's some emergency, they're bringing in the entire police department, for example, right? They're very disconnected. And I think that the orders to them are probably unclear. So you've got a lot of them who are out there doing their own thing and have probably been waiting for this moment where they feel like they can do whatever, and they don't represent the law. They didn't take an oath, and they're just getting off on it. But when you see these attorneys step up and ask one or two basic questions, they just disperse like rats and roaches. And they're not walking to the end of the driveway to get in a car. They're walking 1, 2, 3 blocks down the street because they've parked their vehicles, which they also don't want on camera. And so if you know individuals, same thing with neighbors just stepping up and asking basic questions. The more questions that are asked, the more people that are standing with their fellow Americans and their neighbors, they're going to move on and they're going to get out of there, and they're probably not going to come back.
Yeah, and why would they? Because the one thing that they can handle is exposure. I mean, we've seen this at Republican town halls too. Sue somebody for 9 figures or just plaster their faces everywhere, and they stop being so brave after all. So Waj, the immigrants' right groups are already preparing legal challenges to this, arguing that it violates international protections for asylum seekers facing persecution. And just sort of unrelatedly, Kristi Noem was on Capitol Hill today testifying on DHS's portion of the budget, but in the context of this latest assault on immigrants by the Trump regime. And this will be fun for us. She got absolutely destroyed by Democratic Representative Lauren Underwood. So I want us to take a look at Representative Underwood asking Noem about the Constitution and due process.
Do you believe that the Constitution grants everyone in our country the right to due process, including non-citizens?
The The administration has the authority to.
Ma'am,
look
I'm
at
looking for a
law
yes or
transfers
no
back
question.
and to
Yes or no. Do you believe the
reappropriate them
concept?
as
Yes,
appropriate.
ma'am. Do you,
We have
ma'am?
not conducted in
Reclaiming
any
my
kind
time,
of
Mr.
impoundment.
Chairman.
Time is yours.
Okay, Secretary Noem, I'm just looking for a yes or no here. Do you believe the Constitution guarantees due process to everyone in America?
Due process is exactly what this Congress
Yes
lays
or
out. and
no?
it is, and
Okay,
the
ma'am,
tools
I'll
that
take
you
that as
give
a
us
no.
on due process
Excuse me,
is
I'm
afforded to us.
ma'am, I'm trying to ascertain your understanding of the law as it applies to your department. And you as its leader should be able to give us a yes or no answer because judge after judge has ruled that the law is not being followed. Do you believe that the U.S. government has the authority to deport American citizens?
No, and we are not deporting
great.
U.S. citizens.
I'm so happy to hear that you do not believe that the law gives you that authority because the federal government has no authority under U.S. laws to deport any American citizen. And as I know, everyone viewing this hearing today knows that several American citizens have been deported to
haven't.
date.
That is not
Secretary
true.
Noem, that was not a question.
Gosh, I mean, what do you do with these people?
Shameless. First and foremost, respect to Laura Underwood, who just brought the receipts and the fire, and the fact that it was a black woman doing it. Especially to Kristi Noem. I love it.
Yep. Yep.
And the fact
Yep.
is, Kristi Noem knows better and refuses to answer the question. And going back to the fact that they're paying people to self-deport, I want people to really step back. That's the end goal. This is Stephen Miller, Steve Bannon. It is a white nationalist regime, and I know people hate it when we use the word white nationalist and fascist and white supremacist. What more do you want? They
Yep.
want to make America white again at any cost, even if it means destroying the economy. They want to go back to 1920s, even though we don't live in the 1920s. They are disgusted by our presence, our existence, right? They will burn it to the ground instead of sharing the space with us. I think people need to know the mindset. You mentioned mindset. It's very important. This is the end goal. Make America white again by any violent, unconstitutional means necessary. And we saw this also. I was alive during the first recession of my lifetime, the 2008 recession. Immigrants aren't stupid. If they see that America is faltering, guess what? They don't come. They leave, right?
Yeah.
You've already seen in the past 3 months why the U.S. economy is also teetering. Is look at every single country when it comes to summer tourism in the U.S. Did you see where the numbers are, folks? It's like this. Every single country. Down,
Every single one.
down, down, down. So immigrants aren't going to come. The immigrants are here are going to leave. Who's going to do all the jobs that no white person on earth, the poorest white person on earth in America, will never pick fruits, vegetables, do those construction jobs, right? Work as cooks. Immigrants do that, right? Who helps repopulate a lot of these sparse places, right? They're obsessed with pronatalism, Elon Musk and Stephen Miller. The only reason why the birth rate hasn't even fallen lower, folks, in the EU and America, and you want to take a guess? People like me, yep, immigrants, right? People who pay taxes, the immigrants, people who spend money, the immigrants. So you see the self-destruction of white supremacy. It's destroying the economy. It's destroying America's reputation. And folks, for everyone else, it's destroying American democracy. And the point that you mentioned about, he's underwater, right, on immigration now. For Democrats on crime and immigration have always veered right to try to win over Republicans who will never vote for them, right?
Right.
If we're
Yep.
just tough. And you saw in the opening first month, all these Democrats voted with Republicans to pass the horrific Lake and Riley Act. And then finally, the rest of us have been saying, fight for immigrants, fight for their rights, fight for decency, fight for, lead with ethics and values. And you saw Senator Van Hollen. Van Hollen goes by himself to El Salvador. It says, I'm not going to leave until I get proof of life of Abrego Kilmar Garcia, the man who was sent by the Trump administration's own admission that he was sent by accident. And they're so cruel, Mary. They said, we're not going to get him back.
Right.
He got proof of life. Kilmar Garcia was in the news for 2 weeks. Do you know where Donald is on Kilmar Garcia, folks? Negative double digits. And now more and more people are saying, like Adam said, when you record the video of Rumeza Ostrich being literally kidnapped in broad daylight by masked individuals, that was because a neighbor, a white guy, took the camera, said, what are you doing? Who are you? Where is your badges? And you got a whole bunch of Republicans saying, whoa, 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 man, a woman being kidnapped for a thought crime, for co-writing an op-ed? I didn't sign up for that. Another point, Adam, these people are so cruel, folks. They went to go get kids from school in LA, And the LA teacher said, "Who are you? Do you have permission from the family members?" They lied. They lied and said, "Oh yeah, we talked to the parents." They called the parents and said, "You're lying." And then, like rats, they scurried away. That's the courage that we need from everyone else to step up,
Yep.
take out the camera, speak up, defend the kids and the marginalized, and people who say, and the undocumented, and black people, brown people, transgender. Last 3 months, folks, they're coming after everyone. Fascists don't stop.
No, and why should they? Because they look what just happened with the Supreme Court and the transgender ban in the military.
And I think
Adam,
just
you want to
one
say something real quick?
Just one point to add to what you and Waj were talking about in terms of what they want America to look like. It's also not just a white America. It's a white America that's healthy, right? And I say that because if you look at the civil service, you've got an incredible, diverse group of Americans that looks like America, but you've got a lot of disabled veterans. And the first people that this sort of $1,000 offer to self-deport reminds me of this bullshit offer to take some money and get out of government, right? And these are the same people who have spent their entire lives busting their ass, some of them losing their legs overseas in bullshit wars that Dick Cheney and George Bush got us into, and now they're trying to do the right thing, and they're put in that same spot. And it's truly a sick thing, but a lot of this stuff, they sort of have these same parallels.
It's eugenics, folks. It's eugenics.
It is.
Look, they wanted RFK wanted that registry for autistic people. Elon Musk says he wants productive people. Just listen to him.
Got to be honest, I think it's eugenics for everybody but them, because if we look at what they're doing with research funding in the sciences, which we will do, because this is dangerous stuff, and they're doing
and
everything
the air quality
with
in parks. All parks. If you're going to Yosemite with the fam, bring a gas mask this summer, guys.
He's right.
Yep.
They're not going to control air quality, because F those families. Who needs good air?
To the extent that the parks are even going to be open. Okay, so I want to get everybody quickly to everybody's questions, comments. Nikatsu, thank you so very much for that. That's awesome. Shout out to Eric Iverson at The Hague for the first crimes against humanity lawsuit filed against Bessent, Bondi, Rubio, and Donald. Awesome. I wish it actually, was something that would be what's the word I'm looking for? Implemented, but sadly it won't be. Drake Timbershaft, thank you so much. Question: have you heard the tragedy of Darth Trump the Dim? I have not, but I now must check it out, because I'm one of those nerds.
Why insult Darth Vader? At least Darth Vader had some good in him. We shouldn't.
He did actually. But slowly got beaten out of him, and that's what happened to Donald. But there are no redeeming. You're in trouble when Darth Vader has more redeeming characteristics than you do. Not a good direction to be taking your life in. Diane, thank you so much for your cat moderator fee.
That is so good.
Yes, we have fictional fees here. I don't want anybody to think that they're real fees. We have very creative people. Okay. Canadian in the house. Thank you so much, traveling photographer. Canada never 51. No, indeed. Carney will get it done. Intellect, diplomacy, and being thought of positively around the world always succeeds over incompetence and bullying. Absolutely. I just want him to punch Donald, metaphorically speaking, in the face. That's all. That's all I'm asking. Bank, thank you so much for that comment. A demented old man with a heart of stone. Does he have a heart at all? I'm not so sure. But yes, I can co-sign. Dusk Tracy, that's awesome. Thank you so very much. Love this comment. My reopen Alcatraz fee, so Orange Ass has a place to retire. Absolutely. We just need one cell open on Alcatraz. I keep saying Alcatraz.
And maybe for a different day, but I think I saw online today that he's only talking about Alcatraz because he watched something recently.
Yes, we talked. For those of you who don't know, we just dropped a video. I talked all about this issue. And yes, there is some speculation.
I'll watch your video.
Not only was it Escape from Alcatraz was the movie from 1979, which is close to the decade Donald remains trapped in. But now this is suspicious. It was aired twice on the PBS station in Florida. Hmm.
And was it during Shark Week?
Oh my goodness gracious.
Did he have
That
to
would
watch
just be a
something
perfect
else?
storm of idiocy.
Any fact checkers out there?
Let's somebody let us know. Swanee, comment, greetings from Provence. I read that someone suggested turning Mar-a-Lago into a prison instead of Alcatraz because all the criminals are already there. That would be a good shortcut, but I have to be honest with you, Alcatraz is nicer. I've been to both. So I can say
Oh.
that with some authority.
And that would probably get him more money in his pockets.
That's true too.
Unfortunately.
And let's not do that. All right. And super sticker, John. Thank you so much, John, for that. And finally, Andrea T. Thank you, Andrea. Please join Veteran Unite, America Unite protest on Friday, June 6, 2 p.m. Washington, D.C., hosted by Christopher Goldsmith. Time to call off work. Yeah, we're getting there. We are getting close to shut it all down territory. Okay, guys, that does it for us today. Thanks so much for joining us. Everybody watching on YouTube, everybody streaming on Twitter and Substack. Thank you. Everybody listening to the podcast, to our moderators for just doing an amazing job, a very difficult job, actually, of keeping the community awesome, to all of our super stickers, everybody giving us gifts and fees. We so appreciate you. You really help keep us going. Of course, to my amazing team, thanks, guys, for everything you do. And to my nerds, Waj Ali, Adam Parkamenko, thank you guys so much for being here. I will be back at 6 p.m. For Mary Trump Live. That's Monday through Friday, 6 p.m. Eastern. And that's it for now. I will see you guys later. In the meantime, everybody, please stay safe and be kind.